and to all the personnel at the FBI for keeping Americans safe. Earlier at this hearing, it was brought up that COVID-19 could be a bioweapon. So before I ask you any questions, I just want to make a public service announcement. If you're watching this and you believe COVID-19 is a bioweapon, you can protect yourself. Go get vaccinated. If you're fully vaccinated, then COVID-19 largely cannot harm you. Please consult your doctor if you have any questions. So Director Wray, I'd like to follow up on the questions by Congressmembers Zoe Lofgren, Congressmember Issa, as well as Congresswoman Sparks on Section 702 of FISA and the database. As Congresswoman Sparks mentioned, we wrote a letter to you about how the FBI got access to private information of Americans without a warrant from this database. I appreciate your response back, where you've implemented a number of procedures to mitigate this from happening in the future. What I'd like to know is, if in the future the FBI either accidentally or intentionally gets this information from the foreign surveillance database without a warrant, do you segment that information so that if it's ever used in a court of law, the defendant can challenge it and challenge how it may have influenced your investigation?
I think the answer is yes, but I prefer to make sure that I have people follow up with you to make sure that we're giving you the technically precise answer to that question.
I appreciate if you could do that. Thank you. My next question goes to January 6th insurrection and what it was based on. I appreciate that you earlier had stated that you investigated alleged voter fraud and you could not find any fraud sufficient to overturn the results of the election. In these 5 or so arrests of the individuals that attacked our Capitol, it's true, isn't it, that a number of them went to the Capitol to stop the Electoral College from being certified based on the big lie that the election was stolen? In other words, they were there not because they were upset about corporate tax rates, but because they believed the election was stolen. Is that correct?
Well, certainly some portion of the individuals that we have arrested so far were individuals whose intention was to interfere with or obstruct the operation of Congress's constitutional responsibilities here.
And our constitutional responsibility on that day, on January 6th, was to have the election results in the Electoral College, correct?
Yes.
Hackers have done. It seems like in the 21st century that these cyber attacks are only going to increase. Would you agree, Director Wray, that we're likely going to see an increase in cyber attacks against both the public and private sector?
Yes, we think the cyber threat is increasing almost exponentially. I mean, the ransomware alone, the total volume of amounts paid in ransomware, I think, has tripled over the last year. We're investigating, I think, 100 different ransomware variants, and each one of those 100 has dozens, if not hundreds, of victims. And that's just ransomware. That's just ransomware. We obviously are investigating scores and scores and scores of nation-state intrusions and other kinds of cyber criminal attacks. So the scale of this is something that I don't think this country's ever seen anything quite like it, and it's going to get much worse.
Private sector. That's why I've introduced legislation to provide incentives for people to go into the cybersecurity field. We're simply going to need more of these cyber workers in order to protect Americans in the future. Now, some of these hacker groups appear to either be in Russia or operate with either the complicity of Russia or directly at the behest of Russia. Would you agree that there is some state action involvement in some of these hacker groups?
Well, it, of course, varies from intrusion to intrusion. We know the Russians have a very active, clearly state-sponsored cyber campaign, including things like the SolarWinds intrusion, which we have now publicly attributed to the SVR. In the past, there have been other indictments where we've brought against other members of the Russian intelligence services. Separate from that, there are, of course, cyber criminal actors, any number of whom operate, quite a number of whom operate on Russian soil. The degree of nexus between those cyber criminals and the Russian government is not something I can discuss in an open hearing, but I will say that the most recent actors, the so-called dark side actors involved in the Colonial Pipeline attack, are individuals who, perhaps not coincidentally, specifically target English-speaking victims.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Biggs.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Thanks, Director Wray, for being